Before the Belmont Stakes became the crown jewel of American horse racing, before Wall Street was tamed by blue blood dynasties, there was a 24-year-old German-Jewish immigrant named August Belmont, stepping off a ship in New York City with nothing but impeccable manners, a pocket full of Rothschild connections, and a plan. It was 1837. Banks were collapsing, fortunes evaporate, and into this chaos walked Belmont, the Rothschilds' personal fixer, now stranded in a broken American economy. Instead of continuing to Havana as instructed, Belmont made a decision that would change the face of American finance. He stayed. He opened a firm. And within a few years, this elegant outsider didn't just survive the panic of 1837, he owned it. Soon, the name Belmont would be synonymous with democratic politics, elite society, and an entirely new American pastime, horse racing. But how did one immigrant banker go from Rothschild employee to founding an American dynasty that pulled the strings of both money and power? To find out, we have to trace his steps back to Europe. August Belmont wasn't born powerful. He was born into a small town called Alzey in the German Confederation in 1813, part of a modest Jewish family with no claim to wealth, privilege, or power. His real name was August Schönberg, meaning beautiful mountain in German. When he was just 7, his mother died, forcing him to move to Frankfurt to live with relatives. At the time, Frankfurt wasn't just another city, it was the banking capital of continental Europe and home to the most powerful financial empire in the world, the Rothschilds. Through a complex web of familial ties, Belmont was able to enter the orbit of this dynasty. After his mother's death, he lived with his uncle and grandmother in Frankfurt, where he attended the Philanthropin, a school founded by Mayor Amschel Rothschild, designed to integrate the city's Jewish and Christian communities. When he was 15, he was forced to withdraw from the Philanthropin after his father failed to pay tuition. His relatives prevailed upon the Rothschild family, who were relatives by marriage of his grandmother and already leading European financiers, to train him for business. At the age of 15, Belmont began working at the Frankfurt branch of the Rothschild Bank. Not in a gilded office, but on the ground. He swept floors, ran errands, and studied English and French in stolen hours. At 16, he was learning accounts. But even in these humble beginnings, something about Belmont stood out. He had charm, work ethic, and a razor-sharp mind for numbers. By the time he turned 20, he was a private secretary, traveling across Europe on Rothschild business, shaking hands in Naples, managing correspondence in Paris, soaking in the rhythms of high finance. Then in 1837 came the assignment that would change the course of his life. The Rothschilds dispatched him to Havana, Cuba, to safeguard investments in the Spanish-controlled sugar trade. But fate had other plans. Belmont's ship stopped in New York City, a detour that would become destiny. He arrived in the middle of chaos. That spring, America was hit by the panic of 1837. Banks were failing. The Rothschilds' American agent had just gone bankrupt, losing $7 million, an eye-watering sum at the time. Belmont looked around, saw opportunity in the wreckage, and made a choice that even his Rothschild mentors hadn't anticipated. He stayed. At just 24 years old, Belmont opened August Belmont and Company at 78 Wall Street and declared himself the Rothschild representative in America. He had no official title, no army of staff, but he had nerve, timing, and the Rothschild brand behind him. Within months, he was salvaging European investments, calming markets, and establishing himself as a player in New York's financial world. August Belmont and Company wasn't just another bank. It was a financial lightning rod. Between 1837 and 1842, Belmont turned Wall Street upside down. Backed by the Rothschilds, he acted as their paying agent, dividend collector, and personal intel network in America. But what made him dangerous wasn't just who he worked for, it was how he played the game. After the panic of 1837, while others were drowning in debt, Belmont used Rothschild credit to scoop up currency, commodities, and real estate for as low as 10 cents to the dollar. He pioneered early securitization strategies, rapidly moving money and goods through an international financial web New York had never seen before. He became known as the King of the Money Changers. By 1840, just 3 years after stepping off the boat, Belmont had built a personal fortune of $100,000, equivalent to $2.96 million today, making him one of the richest men in New York and one of America's top 3 private bankers. And he was only 26. Belmont had made it out of the ashes of Frankfurt and stepped directly into the heart of American capitalism. But finance, as it turns out, was only the first act of his transformation. What came next would push him into the political arena and into the smoky back rooms where real American power was brokered. By the 1850s, August Belmont wasn't just surviving America's unpredictable financial system, he was thriving inside it. The elegant young immigrant who had arrived with Rothschild backing now stood at the helm of his own Wall Street firm, August Belmont & Co., managing fortunes, facilitating foreign investment, and guiding America's elite through the turbulent waves of capitalism. But Belmont's real genius wasn't just in spotting good deals. It was in timing and in knowing where to insert himself when others pulled back. During the boom of the 1850s, Belmont turned crisis into opportunity with almost surgical precision. His firm became a magnet for European capital seeking a foothold in the growing American economy. Railroads, infrastructure, and Western expansion were all exploding, and Belmont knew exactly where to place the bets. One of his most lucrative plays? Railroad bonds. With insider knowledge of political developments and access to European financiers, Belmont served as the middleman between old world money and new world ambition. These deals earned him millions in underwriting fees, commissions, and returns. By mid-decade, it was said that Belmont had built a personal fortune exceeding $2 million, well over $75 million in today's dollars. But while others flaunted their riches, Belmont played a longer game. He knew that real power in America didn't just come from wealth, it came from political influence. And Belmont had his sights set on the engine of American politics, the Democratic Party. At the time, the Democrats were the dominant force in American government, but deeply divided, especially over the question of slavery and expansion. Belmont, with his diplomatic finesse and financial firepower, saw a way to thread the needle. He began quietly backing Democratic candidates, writing checks, hosting gatherings, and using his European connections to help build credibility for the party abroad. His close friendship with Senator John Slidell of Louisiana, a powerful voice in Southern politics, gave him a front-row seat to the inner workings of the party. By 1856, Belmont was so embedded in Democratic fundraising that he was appointed as U.S. Minister to the Netherlands under President James Buchanan. It was a diplomatic post, yes, but more importantly, it gave Belmont cover to continue building networks in Europe, all while remaining deeply connected to American power. Though he initially opposed Abraham Lincoln, Belmont quickly rebranded as a Union supporter once the Civil War erupted, without abandoning his Southern business ties. Behind the scenes, he leveraged his European connections to block foreign support for the Confederacy, lobbying British and French leaders to stay neutral. His role wasn't just domestic, it was international diplomacy disguised as party politics. At home, Belmont funded Union regiments, especially among German-American communities, while keeping the fractured Democratic Party alive through war and political chaos. When he returned from The Hague, Belmont wasn't just a banker anymore. He was a political operator, a kingmaker, a man who could whisper in the ears of presidents and senators while moving millions in capital behind the scenes. But the biggest test of his influence was still ahead, because as the clouds of civil war began to gather over the country, Belmont would be forced to choose between his business ties, his political alliances, and his place in history. In 1840s New York, August Belmont was rich, foreign, and unapologetically flashy, and the old money elites hated it. The city's Protestant, Knickerbocker aristocracy turned up their noses at his lavish tastes, while the established Jewish community, mostly Sephardic, kept him at arm's length. Belmont himself had little interest in the struggling Ashkenazi immigrants who shared his roots. So he carved his own path, socializing with rebellious sons of wealthy families and importing a touch of European flair into American high society. But Belmont's personal life? That was even more scandalous. He openly pursued the infamous ballerina Fanny Elsler, whose reputation for affairs, an illegitimate child, sent shockwaves through polite society. Then, in 1841, rumors of another affair with a married woman led to a public accusation and a duel. Belmont accepted. He was shot in the hip. It didn't kill him, but it definitely got the city talking. Belmont wasn't just breaking into society, he was breaking the rules to do it. August Belmont was many things: a banker, a political operator, a European in temperament. But above all, he was a man obsessed with legacy. He knew that wealth without elegance was vulgar. So in 1849, he married Caroline Slidell Perry, the daughter of Commodore Matthew Perry, the naval hero who would soon open Japan to the West. It was the perfect union of old world wealth and new world pedigree. Their Fifth Avenue mansion became one of New York's most refined salons. Think private concerts, European art collections, and conversations in 3 languages. In Newport, they built a 14-acre estate that redefined East Coast summering. He and Caroline had 6 children, each woven into the fabric of American high society. And through them, Belmont's influence expanded beyond finance and politics into something far more visceral: sport. And to understand how Belmont rebranded his bloodline through one of America's oldest pastimes, we have to talk about horses. By the 1860s, August Belmont had already conquered Wall Street and embedded himself in the highest circles of American politics. But for a man who understood the value of legacy, there was still one frontier left to tame: society. Not just dinners and drawing rooms, but culture itself. Belmont found his opportunity in an arena that was still rough around the edges in America, but refined and revered in Europe: horse racing. In England and France, thoroughbred racing was the sport of kings. Nobility bred horses the same way they arranged marriages, strategically, for power and prestige. But in America, racing was loud, chaotic, and often scandalous. It lacked sophistication, it lacked rules, and most of all, it lacked patrons like Belmont. That would soon change. Drawing on his experience from European tracks and his personal love of horses, Belmont began importing elite bloodstock, thoroughbreds with pedigrees that traced back generations. He spared no expense, buying top sires and mares from England and France, determined to build a racing stable that could dominate both in the paddock and on paper. In 1866, Belmont co-founded the American Jockey Club, a governing body that would enforce rules, regulate races, and bring legitimacy to the sport. No more fixed races or chaotic betting rings. Belmont wanted structure and dignity. Then came the crown jewel, the Belmont Stakes. First run in 1867 at Jerome Park in the Bronx, the Belmont Stakes was created to honor Belmont's contributions to the sport and to set a new standard in American racing. It wasn't just another local derby, it was an institution. The track itself was pristine, the competition elite, the pageantry rivaling anything seen in Europe. The Belmont Stakes would go on to become the oldest and longest of the 3 Triple Crown races, standing alongside the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness as a pillar of American sport. But Belmont wasn't done. He bred and raced his own horses, often winning at tracks up and down the East Coast. He advocated for breeding standards, humane training practices, and fair play. And with his wealth and connections, he brought racing out of the backfields and into the parlors of high society. What had once been considered a rowdy pastime was now transformed into a symbol of aristocratic leisure, thanks, in large part, to one man. When Belmont passed the torch to his son, August Belmont Jr., the family's influence on horse racing only grew. Jr. built Belmont Park in 1905, one of the largest and most elegant racetracks in the world. But it was the senior Belmont who had set it all in motion. Because in a country obsessed with speed, status, and spectacle, August Belmont found the perfect way to etch his name into the American imagination, on the back of a thundering thoroughbred. From Rothschild apprentice to American aristocrat, August Belmont built more than a fortune. He built a framework, a model for how to operate in the shadows, how to straddle continents, how to master politics, finance, society, and sport, all without ever holding elected office or commanding an army. The Belmont Stakes still runs each year, the subway still moves beneath Manhattan, and in countless corners of American life, the fingerprints of one family remain. Their name might not be carved into Mount Rushmore, but make no mistake, August Belmont and his heirs helped design the mountain.